With Pro Tours Past being very much written out for us, understanding what were the best decks in the format and what decks were planning on showing up, who was planning on playing what, and all the craziness that happened, it seems like Pro Tour Dominaria was going to be sort of different from Pro Tours Past, being how almost any deck in Standard seemed like it was great. I remember as soon as Dominaria came out, people were talking about monocolor decks like mono red, green, Stompy with the Galta and the Steel Leaf Champion, to mono black Control being just a very powerful deck, being able to play with cards like Cabal Stronghold and all the other big bad black creatures that we had in Standard, along with all the great removal that black seems to have. And even seeing a resurgence in the different control decks, going away from Scarab God as a main way to win, going towards Teferi, Hero Dominaria, sometimes even Karn itself, and all these other little things to try to win the game. And it seemed like Standard was going to be in almost a better place as it's been for the last few set releases, where it wasn't going to be Teamer Energy anymore, or blue-black control, or Scarab God decks playing Torrential Gearhulks, and so on and so forth. And to a slight bit of disappointment, we kind of got more of the same, even though I'll address it later on why Standard cannot nearly be as diverse as what we would want Modern or even Legacy to be, and I'll address that later in the week in another video. But looking at the top 8, if you watched any of the Pro Tour, a lot from what I gathered from a lot of the pros is if you were preparing for the Pro Tour, you just drafted until all the cards looked the same, and you played the best deck. And what was considered the best deck might not have been a surprise to a lot of people, but in looking at the top 8, which is what we're going to do today, we're going to look at the top 8 of this Pro Tour, kind of go through the chain of who won what round, who was playing what deck, going over why the best deck, or what people thought was the best deck, ended up winning, and going over the deck that actually won the Pro Tour. So I'm gonna stop the intro and everything. I'm gonna quit talking. I'm gonna bring up the bracket from the Pro Tour that happened this weekend, go over it, my thoughts and opinions, and just let's have some fun with it. So here's the results that we have from the top 8, and again I will go over the deck list, and not very many of them, like maybe a few cards difference, but in the breakdown I'm just gonna verbally go over it. 5 of the decks were red-black aggro decks, or some red-black deck, because I think one of them is called red-black mid-range, but the difference is the mid-range deck has one more Chandra and one more Heart of Kiran than the other aggro decks, or what they consider aggro decks. 2 mono-red decks and an Esper control deck. So with the overwhelming majority, 7 out of 8 decks realistically being a red deck, because even the red-black deck, I believe, is for a little bit of extra removal, like a few different hard removal spells and Scrap Heap Scrounger, only the real cards needing black. So to me, they're just basically like they're splashing black. They're not really like a red-black aggro deck. They're red splashing black aggressive deck. So 7 out of the 8 decks being red decks, the other one being the Esper control deck, which I thought would show up. I figured Jeskai Control would probably be the one to break through the top 8 if we were going to have a control deck, but obviously being proved wrong, because the removal and hand disruption is probably a lot better than just the extra removal that you get in red. So going over the top 8, we have Kazuyuki Takamura and Marcio Carvalho, and we'll go, I'll just bring this up here. Marcio was playing the red-black aggro deck, and then Kazuyuki Takamura was playing the red-black mid-range deck, and this is where I will make like the comparison. So Marcio's red-black aggro deck was playing the 2 Chandra Torch of Defiance, the Balmac Courier, which has proven to be a really good card in Standard, 2 Kari Zevs, just another really aggressive creature on attacking on turn 3, just an easy way to get in 3-6 points of damage. Goblin Chain Whirler, which was the breakout card from Dominaria, mainly being, I believe, 4 copies in 7 out of the 8 decks, and of course the 8th deck being As Per Control, where obviously it wasn't even in the colors to play it. Obviously being the control deck, it probably didn't want it anyway if it were playing red, but 32, or in the top 7 decks in the format, all of them were playing 4 copies of Goblin Chainwhirler, which is amazing. One of Glorybringer, which has been like a menace. It was great in the Teamer Energy decks, a deck that I brought up in the beginning, being kind of the boogeyman of the format. PNLR, another good way to push through damage while also being aggressive herself. 3 mana, put 3 power on the board. Cruise up Heart of Kirin very well. Just another really aggressive creature. Scrap Heap Scrounger, another 2-drop. Cruise Heart of Kirin, very aggressive and just a recurring threat for the deck as we play 24 creatures. Soulscar Mage, pretty good. Not really like a good for its prowess, because we play 9, 10, 11, 12 different cards in our deck that actually trigger prowess, but with the fact of if a source you would deal non-combat damage to a creature an opponent controls, you put -1/-1 counters on it instead, which goes really well with Goblin Chainwhirler and cards even like Abrade and Shock, because it'll just put minus counters on it, making their creature smaller. And then Rekindling Phoenix, probably one of the best cards to come from Rivals of Ixalan. Just a 4-mana 4/3 flyer is really good, and then the fact that you have to have 2 removal spells for it to actually get rid of it, and when it comes back it actually gains haste as well. Cut to Ribbons, a really aggressive card that gives you reach at the end of the game, which the deck honestly doesn't lack, but the fact that you can close out a game a turn or 2 sooner with Cut to Ribbons is I'd say pretty useful. Abrade, really good, destroys other Heart of Kirins and a lot of the other creatures played in the other red-black or mono-red decks. Unless it's Disintegration, hard removal for the deck. A 1-of Shock, doesn't hurt for reach or even just killing the other smaller creatures. Heart of Kirin, and then the land base is pretty easy. Again, like I said, a lot of these red-black decks are just playing like the black for Unlicensed Disintegration, the Cut to Ribbons, and being able to get back Scrap Heap Scrounger. So no need to really play a basic Swamp in the deck, which could or couldn't be a problem considering that some decks are playing Field of Ruin, but obviously it didn't really hurt any of the decks because of the fact that their black mana came from the Canyon Sloughs, the Dragon Skull Summits, the 1-of Spire of Industry to go with the Heart of Kirins, and the even can produce mana from the Scrap Heap Scrounger or the Thopter that PNLR makes. And also Aether Hub is just kind of maybe even a one-shot, like, here's my black mana, like, let's go kind of thing. So I'm not really going to be looking at the sideboard either, because a lot of these, like, the numbers are going to vary anyway, and I will go over, like, a hard, like, tech of the the second deck, who got second place in the event anyway, and then Kazuki Takamura, again, basically the same thing with this one, playing basic Swamps, playing Karn, just being a more willing to play the late game, but in a sense sort of the same thing, because it can be a deck that just kind of turns itself on its head and then it just goes, like it can get off the ground pretty quickly. So knowing that, Marcio ended up actually winning that matchup against Kazuyuki, 3 games to 2, moving on to play Goncalo Pinto, which I believe he was nope, I was wrong. He was also playing the red-black aggro deck. Again, a lot of this is a lot of the same decks. Owen Turmoil also playing the red-black deck. White Darby playing mono-red, beating Thomas Hendricks, and Manuel Lenz getting knocked out. So our top 4 consisted of red-black aggro, red-black aggro, red-black aggro, mono-red aggro, and then our finals being the red-black versus mono-red matchup, which Wyatt Darby ended up winning. And if you watched any of the finals, especially the final play of the finals, it was amazing. It was a great finish, and whenever it goes up on the official Magic the Gathering channel, or if you catch it on Twitch or anything, definitely give it a watch. It was very, very exciting, and just kind of one of the ways that makes this game honestly really great. So with knowing what the top 8 was, again, 7 out of the 8 decks really being 6 out of the 8, even like that's the best I'll give it. 6 out of 8 basically being mono red, some of them splashing black, the other ones actually being true mono red, versus a red black mid-rangey control deck that can be not as aggressive, but aggressive like the mono red deck, and then an Esper control deck which didn't make it past the quarterfinals. What does that say about Standard? Well, Standard seemed like it was in a good place, and then all of a sudden, now at the eve of the Pro Tour, where it's just red black aggro, mono red aggro, and all these different control decks that people were expecting didn't really show up. So I guess Standard's okay. I mean, when you only have 8 sets or 7 or 8 sets in a format versus 50 plus or however many like Modern, and then Legacy having all these sets throughout Magic history, it does kind of make sense that the variance between having 20 decks in a format like Modern that are all really good versus having maybe 2 or 3 decks in Standard makes sense again, and in a video I'll go over it more. But so what do we get from this? What happens? How can we make Standard better? Realistically, people have been saying to ban Goblin Chain Whirler because it was a big deal, or even unbanning cards. And unbanning cards isn't really a good idea because the only card that really matters that would get unbanned is Rampaging Ferocidon, and that card I think just makes these the mono red decks or the red black aggro decks better, like insanely better. So what's gonna happen with Standard? I don't know. I'll go over that in another video when we talk about the red black aggro decks potential bannings in Standard. In my opinion, the short of it, I don't think anything can get banned. I'll be willing to go more in depth again into another video that will come out this week, and kind of wrapping up the Pro Tour and everything. All in all, it was great. Standard looked like a lot of fun, or Standard draft looked like a lot of fun. Standard looks like it could still be fun. There's still probably some decks that are waiting to break out. The Pro Tour really shouldn't be indicative of your deck choice for what you want to play for Standard events, whether it's just Sunday Showdowns or whenever your Standard Showdown is, FNM, or any other big tournaments coming to either your store or to another store you plan on going to. Because the format can be diverse, there are different ways to beat said decks, but in reality, the decision's up to you. Again, I think Standard can be fine, and it can work through it, and possibly even with the rotation of Kaladesh block and Amonkhet block, things can get a lot better. But that's going to be it for me. That's sort of kind of my wrap up of the tournament, going over the essential deck, basically the red black mid range deck, Wyatt Darby's mono red deck. I mean, 24 mountains and probably every aggressive creature in the format, with a little bit of reach being in a shock and lightning strike. Again, this deck is amazing. It's amazing because it only plays 24 mountains, but the deck is good enough. The Chandras, the Treasure Map, Fight with Fire, all these things to give the deck more reach and to be able to fight against the other aggressive decks in the format. I mean, this is how Standard's been for a while. I really wish Dominaria was, or the Pro Tour Dominaria was different, but I guess it happens. Like, we, again, can't expect a lot of diversity from a format that has 7 or 8 sets in it versus one that has 50. And probably why Modern is probably one of the most popular formats, other than now, aside from Standard. Even though Standard was the format to brew in, now seems like Modern is the better of the one. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed, I did it a little bit differently this time than I have in Pro Tours past or even Worlds past. So if you want to see more Standard stuff, if you want me to actually go over and break down the mono red aggro deck, good matchups, bad matchups, so on and so forth, let me know in the comments of this video. and be on the lookout for a future video on just talking about standard. What can we do to improve the format? Can it be improved? Is there anything that can be done to increase the diversity, just to make it a lot more fun? And be on the lookout for another modern video this week. I plan on going a little bit more into the meta of modern, and just breaking it down even more. Another one of the top decks and one of my personal favorite decks later this week. So that's going to be it for me. Again, if you enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like, comment what you enjoyed about the Pro Tour, if there was a deck that stood out to you that didn't top 8, that you thought was going to top 8, a deck that could be any of the decks, anything like that. Feel free to start a conversation with me, and I will see you guys in the next video.